In the year 1927, deep beneath the ruins of ancient Nippur, archaeologists lifted a small clay tablet from a sealed pottery jar, untouched for 4,000 years. The cataloguer who first examined it set it down within 40 minutes, wrote a single cautious line in the ledger, and buried it in a basement drawer where it stayed unread for 44 years. When a young Oxford philologist finally broke its silence in 1971, she refused for months to publish what she found. The tablet describes a small four-legged creature sent down from the sky. It describes the cat and its purpose. Before anything else, take a moment now and tap that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear has spent nearly a century buried in accession ledgers and restricted basement drawers, and the only way more of these forgotten translations reach the surface is if channels like this one keep growing. Tap subscribe, turn the notifications on, and let us continue. The story of how the tablet came back into the light begins with a woman named Eleanor Ashworth, a junior philologist from Oxford, who arrived at the University of Pennsylvania Museum in the spring of 1971 on a 6-month exchange. Ashworth was 29 years old, a specialist in late 3rd millennium temple documents, and she had been given the assignment that no senior scholar wanted. The staff called it the residue drawer, a collection of roughly 200 minor tablets, fragments, and seal impressions recovered from the Nippur expeditions of the 1920s and never formally examined. Most of the residue was administrative. Inventories of grain, receipts for sheep, lists of temple labourers and the rations owed to them. The kind of bureaucratic sediment that settles in the corners of every Mesopotamian excavation and waits, sometimes for generations, for someone with enough patience to read it. In her 3rd week, Ashworth pulled drawer 14. Inside it, wrapped in oiled cotton that had gone brittle with age, was a tablet no larger than a man's palm, its surface carrying cuneiform pressed with unusual fineness, almost reverence, as though the scribe had understood that what he was recording could never be repeated. The catalogue card gave the number N2847 and a single line of description written in 1927 by an assistant cataloguer who had spent, by his own note, less than an hour with the piece. The line read, "Content of religious or mythological nature defer to senior staff." No senior staff had ever come. The tablet had waited 44 years. Ashworth would later write in a private letter to a colleague at Cambridge that she knew within the first 6 lines that what she was holding did not belong in the residue drawer at all. It belonged somewhere else, she wrote. Somewhere the museum did not yet have a category for. The paleography dated the tablet to the final kings of the 3rd dynasty of Ur, more than 4,000 years before her own time. The scribe identified himself in the opening lines by a name that translates roughly as Enmetar, son of Kur-Ningal, a temple official attached to the Ekur, the great house of the god Enlil at Nippur. The opening was formal. It invoked the high gods. It asked the favour of the scribe of heaven, and it declared that what followed was a true accounting of an old matter given to the writer by his father, who had received it from his father going back, the tablet says, to the days when the gods still walked among men and the doors of the upper places had not yet been sealed. That phrase, the doors of the upper places, appears several times across the tablet's surface, and Ashworth would spend nearly a year trying to determine what it referred to. Her eventual conclusion, defended in an unpublished monograph she completed in 1973, was that it referred to specific physical locations on the Earth, points where, in the belief of the Sumerians, the boundary between the visible world and another world ran particularly thin. We will return to that detail, because it matters more than it sounds. What she read next, in the lamplit quiet of the museum's reading room, was the reason the tablet had been sealed in a jar in the first place. The scribe had recorded the arrival on Earth of a small 4-legged creature, brought down out of the sky by the Anunnaki for a purpose the tablet names in 3 words: the watching, the guarding, the keeping. Ashworth set the tablet down. She left the reading room for almost an hour, then she came back, sat down and began to translate. What the tablet describes next is the arrival. The Anunnaki, the scribe records, came down from their dwelling places in the higher sky to inspect the early settlements of men, and they found among the dwellings of men a great unhappiness. The men were sick in their sleep. Their thoughts were crowded with shapes that did not belong to them. Their children were waking in the night and pointing at the corners of their houses where nothing visible stood, and weeping until the dawn. The elders went to the priests, and the priests went to the offering stones, and the offering stones carried the message upward. And the gods, the tablet says, recognized the cause of the sickness immediately, because the cause was not new to them. The cause, the tablet states with no hesitation at all, was that things from the other side of the thin places were entering the dwellings of men while men slept, and feeding on what the scribe calls the inner light. The Anunnaki conferred among themselves. One of them, named in the tablet as Ninkarag, the Lady of the Foothills, proposed a solution. The solution was to bring down from a world the tablet never names, referring to it only as the green star of the seventh house, a small creature that already existed there for exactly this purpose. A creature whose eyes could see what human eyes could not. A creature whose body, though small, carried within it an energetic signature that the things from the other side of the thin places could not approach. The tablet then describes this creature in a passage that occupies nearly a third of its entire surface, and the description is unmistakable. 4 legs, a tail held in many positions, each position carrying meaning. Eyes that take in light and return it, so that they shine in the dark. Soft pads on the feet that make no sound on the floor. A coat of fur that, when stroked against its natural direction, releases a small spark, as though the creature carried within itself the residue of the lightning. The creature sleeps, the tablet says, for 2/3 of the day, but its sleep is not the sleep of men. Its sleep is, in the words of the scribe, a watching that wears the appearance of resting. And when the creature is fully awake, when it rises and turns its head and fixes its gaze upon a corner of a room where no person stands, it is at that moment doing the work for which it was brought down to earth. The scribe gives the creature a name, and the name is where Ashworth's difficulties began. The tablet calls it the Mushdub, a term Ashworth translated, with considerable hesitation, as the holder of the door. She hesitated because the standard Sumerian word for the domestic cat in surviving texts is shua, and the term Mushdub appears in no other tablet from any other site. It is used once, only here, on N2847. Ashworth's interpretation, defended in the 1973 monograph, is that Mushdub was never the common word for the animal at all. It was a ceremonial word, a priestly word used only when speaking of the cat in its original capacity. In the marketplace, the cat was shua. In the language of the temple, when the priest spoke of what the creature had been sent here to do, the cat was Mushdub, the one who keeps the door from opening. The next passage describes the deployment. The Anunnaki brought down many of the creatures, in numbers the tablet records as more than the leaves of a single olive tree, and placed them first in the temples, then in the houses of the priests, then in the houses of the kings, and finally in the dwellings of ordinary men. The order is deliberate, and the tablet is specific about why. The temples came first because the temples, in the worldview of the scribe, were built on the thin places. They were deliberately constructed on top of them to mark their locations and to manage what passed through them. The cats were placed in the temples to do what the priests, with all their ceremonies and all their offerings, could not do alone, to stand at the door, to watch what tried to come through, to send it back. And there is one passage here that has caused more difficulty for translators than any other. It describes what happens when a cat sees something that should not be there. The cat becomes wide, the tablet says. Its hair stands, its tail thickens, its body turns sideways to the thing it sees, so that it appears larger than it is. Its eyes do not blink. And in its throat there forms a sound the scribe describes as the sound of stones rolling against each other under deep water. This sound, the tablet says, is not anger. It is the sound by which the cat closes the door. Anyone who has ever lived with a cat and watched it stare at an empty corner, hair raised, tail thickened, a low rolling growl in its throat, has seen exactly what the scribe of Nippur described 4,000 years ago. We have been taught to call it instinct, a draft, a smell, a sound beyond our hearing. The tablet says it is none of those things. The tablet says it is the work. The heart of the tablet, the passage that made Ashworth set the piece down and leave the reading room, is the sequence in which the scribe records the original purpose of the creature in 7 specific functions. He writes them in order, in the calm administrative voice that Sumerian scribes use for all serious matters, as though he were listing the duties of a temple official. In a sense, the tablet would say, that is exactly what he was doing. The first function is the guarding of the sleeping. When a person sleeps, the tablet says the inner light becomes loose in the body, no longer fully anchored, and it is in this state that the unhoused can most easily reach it. The unhoused is the term the scribe uses for things on the other side of the thin places, the ones who have no body of their own. The cat, by placing itself near the sleeper, by curling against the body or sitting at the foot of the bed, anchors the inner light back into the flesh and prevents it from being drawn out. Anyone who has slept with a cat on the bed has felt, the tablet would tell us, exactly what it describes. The unusual depth of the sleep, the absence of certain kinds of dreams, the morning sensation of having been somewhere safer than one would otherwise have been. The second function is the watching of the doorway. Every dwelling has a doorway, and every doorway, in the tablet's understanding, is itself a small thin place, because doorways are points of transition, and the unhoused are drawn to points of transition. The cat sits at the doorway, sometimes for hours, watching what enters and what leaves. It does not watch out of curiosity, the scribe writes. It watches because something has to. The third function is the testing of new things. When a strange object is brought into a dwelling, when a new person enters, when a gift is given, the cat approaches. It sniffs. It places its paw. The tablet says this is not curiosity but inspection. The cat is determining whether what has entered carries any contamination from the other side. If the cat accepts the object is safe. If the cat refuses it, hisses at it, avoids the room in which it has been placed, the tablet says the object should be removed from the dwelling and not brought back. The fourth function is the marking. The cat moves through the house, rubbing its face against the corners, the door frames, the legs of the furniture, depositing on each surface a small portion of its own signature. This signature, the tablet says, is what renders the dwelling uninhabitable to the unhoused. A house marked by a cat for a sufficient length of time becomes, in the language of the scribe, sealed against the lower entries. A house without a cat is by default unsealed. The fifth function is the breaking of silences. The unhoused are most active in silence, the tablet says. They enter dwellings most easily when the dwellings are quiet. And the cat, with its sudden movements, it's leaping at nothing, it's racing through the house in the middle of the night for reasons that seem to belong to no one, is disrupting the silence in the precise moments when the silence has become a doorway. The cat does not run through the house at 3 in the morning because the cat is foolish. The cat runs because something has tried to come through and the cat has chased it back. The sixth function is the holding of the gaze. This is the passage Ashworth later called the most disturbing of all. The cat will fix its eyes on a specific location in a room, sometimes for a great length of time, and refuse to look away. The location, the tablet says, is always the place where something is currently trying to enter. The gaze itself is the barrier. So long as the cat is looking, the entry cannot complete. The cat sees it, the cat holds it, and by holding it, the cat prevents it. The seventh function, the scribe writes, is the one that cannot be fully explained in human language because it requires concepts his own teachers were never able to transmit. It is described only as the giving of the throat sound. the deep, slow, rolling vibration the creature produces when its work is done. The Purr. The tablet says the Purr is not a sound of pleasure. The tablet says the Purr is a frequency set into the design of the creature, a frequency that closes whatever portion of the thin place remains open after the other 6 functions have been performed. The Purr in the tablet's understanding is the final seal. Ashworth completed her translation in the spring of 1973. It ran to 41 pages. She submitted it to 3 journals. All 3 rejected it. One returned the manuscript with a letter stating that the subject matter was unsuitable for serious philological publication. Another sent it for peer review and reported that the reviewers could not agree on whether the work was serious scholarship or an elaborate fabrication. The third kept the manuscript for 9 months and returned it without comment. Ashworth circulated the translation privately in mimeographed copies to a small circle of colleagues at Oxford, Cambridge, Leiden and Chicago. The copies were passed hand to hand, photocopied, recopied, and over the next 20 years they entered the underground literature of fringe Mesopotamian studies, where they remain. The tablet itself was quietly transferred in 1981 from the open archive of the Penn Museum to a restricted storage facility in the lower basement, where access now requires written approval from the curator of the Near Eastern collection. Researchers who have requested that approval over the past 4 decades report, almost without exception, the same outcome. The requests are denied, no reason is given, the drawer stays closed. Near its end, the tablet turns to the question of what would happen if the creatures were no longer here, and the scribe records the answer the priests of the Ekur gave every time it was asked. If the cats withdrew, the thin places would reopen one by one. The unhoused would return to the dwellings of men. The children would once again wake in the night and point at the corners. And within the span of 3 generations, the civilization built upon the assumption of protection would begin, quietly and without obvious cause, to come apart. There is no alarm in his sentences. There is only the recording of what he was told by men whose business it was to know. Then the scribe addresses the future reader directly. He says the writing of the tablet has been done because the knowledge it contains is in danger of being lost. Already in his own time, he writes, the temple officials have begun to treat the cats as ordinary animals, to feed them carelessly, to drive them out of certain shrines, to forget the prayers once said at their birth and at their death. The cats themselves will continue the work, he writes, because the work is in their nature and cannot be removed from them by the forgetfulness of men. But the men who do not honour them will be men whose houses are no longer fully sealed. And in the final line of the tablet, partially damaged but still legible, he writes this: the cats remember what we have forgotten, and that is why they look at us the way they do. The history that followed reads, if the tablet is to be believed, like a long, slow act of forgetting. The Egyptians, who rose roughly 1,000 years after the scribe of Nippur set down his stylus, treated the cat with a reverence no other civilization has matched. The goddess Bastet, cat-headed, woman-bodied, was the protector of the household, the guardian of children, the keeper of the home against the entry of evil. The Egyptians mummified their cats. They buried them in dedicated necropolises. They mourned a household cat by shaving their eyebrows, the same gesture of grief reserved for human family. The penalty for killing a cat, even by accident, was death. None of this makes sense if the cat was merely a useful animal that controlled vermin. It makes complete sense if the Egyptians had inherited, from the Sumerians before them, the understanding that the cat was a guardian whose original posting had never expired. The Egyptians did not invent the reverence, they received it. By Rome, the memory had thinned. By medieval Europe, it had inverted entirely. Religious authorities recategorized the cat as an animal of witchcraft, and the very behaviors the tablet describes as the guarding functions, the staring at nothing, The night running, the watching of doorways, were reinterpreted as evidence that the cat was in league with the very things it had been sent to hold back. Europeans killed their cats in enormous numbers under official encouragement for centuries. The tablet would suggest that those were the centuries during which the dwellings of Europe stood unsealed, and that the cats, when they returned in the slow years after the burnings faded, returned to do the same work they had always done, in houses that no longer remembered needing it. What Ashworth's translation forces us to confront, if we accept it even provisionally, is that everything we believe about this relationship is upside down. We do not own cats. The tablet would say they were placed among us. We did not domesticate them. The tablet would say they accepted a posting. We do not trade food and shelter for companionship. We trade food and shelter for their continued willingness to do work that no member of our species is capable of doing. The cat on the windowsill staring at nothing is not staring at nothing. The cat racing down the hallway at 3 in the morning is not racing for no reason. The cat purring against your chest as you fall asleep is not purring out of contentment alone. Every one of these behaviours, the tablet would say, is the same set of 7 functions the scribe recorded 4,000 years ago, preserved entirely within the creature, even as the civilization that once understood them has forgotten almost everything. Ashworth died in 2007 without seeing her translation published by any major press. The mimeographed copies still circulate, the tablet still sits in its restricted drawer in Philadelphia, and the requests to see it are still denied. And the cats in every house, in every apartment, in every alley and barn where they have made their dwellings continue. They sit at the doors, they watch the corners, they run through the silence, they hold the gaze, and in their throats, when the work is done, they make the sound the scribe of Nippur recorded as the final seal. Whatever you believe about the tablet, whatever you believe about the Anunnaki or the green star of the 7th house, there is one observation that requires no belief at all. If you live with a cat, watch it tonight. Watch where it goes when the lights are turned off. Watch where it sits when the house is quiet. Watch what it stares at when there is nothing there to stare at. And ask yourself honestly whether you are watching an ordinary animal performing ordinary behaviours, or something that arrived here a very long time ago for a very specific purpose that it has never once stopped performing. The scribe recorded what he was told in the calm voice of a man whose only obligation was to the truth. The cats remember what we have forgotten, and this is why they look at us the way they do.